All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's workshop on study skills and learning strategies. Um, this is presented by myself, Marissa. I use she, they pronouns. I am the Education and Administration Coordinator at the Society for Students with a Disability. Hannah, our other presenter, is unfortunately unwell today, so they will not be joining us, but they are a graduate student. They are also a staff member at the Learning Assistance Program, and they ran the Study Skills Program throughout the library last year, I believe. So they have lots of experience in study skills. Myself, I'm also a graduate student in educational psychology, and I have TA'd EDD 101 many times. That's the Learning Strategies for University Success course. So both Hannah and I have some relatively in-depth experience with teaching students about learning strategies and study skills and how to kind of best adapt them for their learning needs. I also wanted to give a territorial acknowledgement that the university and the SSD are on unceded and stolen territories of the Lekwungen and WSÁNEĆ speaking peoples. And that we are at the SSD work quite effort or put a lot of effort into decolonizing our practice as a predominantly white organization and wanting to make sure that the work that we do is good work and that it is meaningful work and that we are listening to and learning from Indigenous folks. So if anyone else would like to give a territorial acknowledgement, perhaps you're zooming in from another location, feel free to do so in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead to our next slide, which is a bit of an introduction. So this is, we want to kind of start off with learning about study skills. And I'm just bringing up my notes here, so just bear with me for a second. But we wanted to talk a little bit about various study skills. We're gonna go into talking about self-regulated learning as well. And yes, we're gonna talk a bit about self-regulated learning and then also learning strategies and walking folks through the strategy library here at UVic. So why are study skills so important? As a student, it may be relatively obvious that studying is pretty key to academic success, but studying is absolutely not a one-size-fits-all thing for all students. Some things might work for some people, some things might really not work for other people. So what you do and when you do it and how you can kind of make that difference in your learning, maybe the difference between success and retakes. Flexibility is a key idea for Hannah when they talk about this specifically. So this is specifically Hannah's specialty, and they really focus on, and also at the SSD, we focus on how disability is a spectrum. So we should always be prepared and be flexible to find what works for ourselves and what works within our own kind of experiences and learning abilities to find what we kind of can do to support ourselves and avoid those kind of one-size-fits-all approaches because those are not great. If you've never thought about what works for you and what doesn't, a good place to start is thinking about what do you do now for your learning and what do you like about it and what do you not like about it? Are there themes or are there directions that you can follow from there? So we're going to talk a little bit about the kind of traditional theory of types of learners. I'm not sure if any of you ever did this in school growing up, but I absolutely did. We had to do a test in school, like more of like a survey, and it asked a bunch of questions like, I like to learn with my hands, or I like to learn by listening. And it created this big, beautiful thing of the type of learner that you are. And I'd be like, you're a kinesthetic learner, or you are a musical learner, or you are a visual learner. So I'm sure all of you have probably heard about this before, but interestingly enough, that theory has been totally, completely debunked. People are not a one size fits all entity. So someone is not specifically like, I only learn from visual ways, or I only learn from kinesthetic ways. As you can probably imagine, I'm sure there are lots of varieties of ways that you folks like to learn and like to study and enjoy to like present material. And it may kind of combine a variety of these, learning types. But all that is to say is people are not a one size fits all. So if you've ever been told at some point in your life, like you are a visual learner and therefore this is how you should study, I would look into broadening that approach and kind of opening that perspective, because it may not be the 100% best thing for you. Yeah, so while this is a totally lovely, simple approach, as I mentioned, it is an idea of the past, and we are not just one individual entity. These styles have also been found to not really fit neurodivergent learners as much. And, that kind of idea of like people must always fit in like one box or another. Like sometimes people are like fitting in multiple different boxes. So yeah, think about that for a little bit. And as a person, you can have some flexibility for different learning styles. You may have different ways that you want to do a certain assignment. So Hannah has given me an example here. Well, they prefer visuals with some simple text, opposed to a video if they're learning a recipe, but they like to listen to books rather than to read books. So there's kind of the dichotomy there of like they would like some text if they're doing kind of a specific task, but if they're doing another task, they actually don't want to be reading the books, they would prefer audiobooks. So we are complex beings. We can't fit into one of these boxes every time. And you may kind of ebb and flow between doing things visually and doing things auditorially and doing things between maybe you prefer presentations over papers, but then other times you prefer papers over presentations. So all that is to be said is flexibility is important, and you're not locked into one type of study skill or learning strategy for the rest of your life. Some places to start is setting proper goals. So I'm going to get into this a little bit as we talk about the cycle of self-regulated learning. But if you're kind of just hopping into here and you're saying, I would really like some study skills and I don't know where to begin, goal setting and time management are two very important things. I'm going to go a little bit more into the goals, as I mentioned, further into the presentation. But for now, we'll talk a little bit about SMART goals, which you may have heard of before. Those are quite frequently brought up, which are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Similarly, the strategy library uses something kind of close to that called CAST goals, concept, action, standard, and time. So I'm going to talk a lot more specifically about CAST goals towards the end of the presentation. But what this is to be said is that goals are more than just saying, I would like to read chapter 1 in my textbook. It's a lot more than that. Goals need to be a lot more specific. They need to have more sustenance to them. They need to have some sort of measurability to know, did I complete this or not? How do I know that I have finished my goal? In terms of time management, the strategy library, which we'll go into a bit later, talks a bit about this again. But time management is incredibly important in terms of study skills. So you may have heard instructors say like, import this all into your Google Calendar, or some instructors say like, something along the lines of have a big calendar on your wall. Different things work for different people. Some people like to plan out every single day, kind of like hour by hour, almost like a meeting schedule. But those meetings are not actually meetings, rather they're study blocks. Some people like to have a little bit more flexibility in that. So maybe they say, okay, for like these 3 hours in the morning, this will be a study block, and then I have my lunch, and then I go to class, and then I study more in the evening. In terms of longer term time management, something that's really important and that I always suggest to my students is that you plan out your semester in an easy to see way that works for you. For me personally, I have a 4-month calendar on my wall beside my desk, and at the beginning of every semester, I fill it out. So for this semester, January, February, March, April, and the first thing I do is go through all my syllabi and write down when are my assignments due. When do I have a big presentation? When do I have to something big at my job? When do I have to have a marking deadline for TAing? All these kind of important things. So you can visually see when are kind of your busy weeks, when are your slower weeks, so that you can use that big picture goal to plan out your semester a little bit, a little bit more in a smaller way. So you don't bump up to the week before reading break and say, oh my goodness, I have 3 exams. What am I supposed to do? I need to study for all of them. I'm panicking. So a wall calendar may work great for some people. A wall calendar may not work for you, and maybe having like a Excel spreadsheet with all of your dates. I've seen some people do that, color code all the dates and then cross them off as they go. That might work for you as well. So finding a way that is that works for you, that your brain is receptive to, that's the most important part. Hannah and I also wanted to talk a little bit about allocating time for breaks and relaxation. You are not a robot machine. You are not built to just only do school or only do work. Please have fun and hang out with your friends and have some relaxation and take care of your body in whatever way that is meaningful to you. So make sure that you're not, chalking your schedule full with like study block after study block after study block, because that is 100% a recipe for burnout. Allow yourself to, take an afternoon off, take a weekend day off, have some time to just do things, because if you don't schedule them in, you're going to do them regardless because you're a human and you're going to realize, oh my goodness, I need a break. And then if you don't schedule them in and you're scheduling all this stuff when you should be studying, you're going to feel overwhelmed and be like, what did I just do? I didn't stick to my plan. I'm so stressed out now. So make sure you take care of yourself and give yourself time. There are some time management templates that exist. The online academic community has one. There are some in the strategy library, which I'll show you as well. So if you don't really know where to start, that is a place to start. And then finally, prioritization. So something that should be focused on when you're not really knowing where to start is thinking about what is your current workload. There is a link to an assessment of current activities in here. I'll send out the slides after so you all can click on the links and physically see them. But kind of think about what are the current things that are happening. Do you have a class that has a really heavy workload? Do you have a class that maybe has a lighter workload? Maybe you're working 2 different jobs and one of them you have shifts more frequently than the other. Think about what your current workload is and, first of all, is it reasonable or feasible for you to continue this workload? If so, how to plan around it, and if not, how to modify that workload so that you're not totally and completely overwhelmed. Hannah suggests using the Eisenhower matrix, which they have graciously linked here as well, which you folks can look at in the slide deck that I will send out. But that's just kind of a way to categorize your tasks and see what is important versus not important, and then urgent versus non-urgent. That is also within the strategy library, I believe. Okay. So other areas to consider could be active learning, spaced repetition. So that could be something like distributed practice, which we'll talk a little bit about as well when we go into the strategy library. Various note-taking strategies, and Hannah has linked this here for all of us, as well as practice testing and error analysis. So now that we kind of had a bit of a background on study skills and ways to kind of assess where you are at, both in terms of time, capacity, all that kind of stuff, and where to start studying, we are going to go into talking about self-regulated learning. So, okay, there we go. There are kind of 4 phases of self-regulated learning, as well as kind of the central, very important part of self-regulated learning. So this image comes from the UVic Learning Strategy Library, as I mentioned. And the 4 phases of SRL, we're going to start at the top here, if you can see, which is task perceptions. So that is basically understanding what is the task that you are doing, figuring out what exactly you are being asked to do, looking over your assignment and asking yourself, what are the learning outcomes of this? What am I being asked to produce? If you're writing a test, what are the questions actually asking you? The next part is goals and plans. So we're gonna go a little bit more into goals and plans and whatnot. But goals and plans mostly cover, as it suggests, goals and plans and kind of ways to plan your study session. Task enactment is actually doing the thing, and large scale adaptation or small scale adaptation is taking what you have done and kind of manipulating it and putting it into other situations. And then metacognitive monitoring and evaluation is the central force, which I will go into a little bit more in depth in our next few slides. So first, we're going to talk about task understanding. What you're going to do when you are doing task understanding is ask yourself, what exactly is being asked of me? If you have, for example, a paper that you need to write, the first thing you're going to want to do is figure out what exactly is this paper wanting me to produce. So looking over the assignment rubric, if you have one, the essay questions, if you have them, the syllabus will often give some good information on this. And then if you still are really unsure of what the task is asking you, contact your instructor and maybe get some clarification. Usually you should be able to figure it out by looking at the assignment itself. On Brightspace, your instructor may post some more like in-depth instructions. There may be pretty in-depth instructions in the syllabus, that kind of stuff. So really focused on what is being asked of you. You also want to draw upon previous experiences. So this may be harder if you're in your first year of university, but as you kind of go through university, you'll be able to draw on these previous experiences a little bit more and think about, okay, if I was asked to do, a 5-page paper on this certain topic, and I did that for a class last year, and I did pretty well on it, I'm asked to do another 5-page paper again. Maybe the expectations will be somewhat similar. So maybe like think about the formatting. Is the formatting similar to a previous experience? Is the subject similar? How can you kind of draw upon your previous knowledge and kind of activate that prior knowledge to go into your task understanding? As I mentioned, you also want to look at the material pretty in depth to understand what exactly are the expectations. So this is not just for assignments. This can be for tests. This can be for article readings that you need to do. So rather than just quickly skimming it over and saying like, okay, I got to get this done, take a good chunk of time to just read and understand what is important. Task understanding is quite foundational to self-regulated learning because if you don't understand exactly what you're supposed to be doing, it's going to be very hard to set effective goals and also to do that task properly if you're not really sure what you're doing. I'm sure all of you have had an experience at some point in time where you're like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm totally lost. It makes the assignment or the reading or whatever you're doing incredibly difficult. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. I absolutely can. I was not using task understanding. I just kind of, said like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to give it a try. So rather than kind of throwing your hands up in the air and going to, if you're totally confused, going to your instructor, checking your Brightspace again, going to a peer in your class and asking them, those are all really great things. And then finally, identifying resources, constraints, and personal attributes that may help or hinder the ability to complete the task. This is something that we often don't think about in task understanding. So specifically in the constraints part, but think about when you're doing task understanding, the resources that may help you complete the task. If you're writing an academic paper, a resource that may help you complete the task is the UVic library and the UVic library databases. So that's something that you may want to look into, or something even like Google Scholar. Those are great. That's a great resource as well. Constraints could be something along the lines of like, maybe you're having a personal thing going on in your life at the time that you're supposed to be doing this assignment, and it is really hard for you to focus on it and kind of understand what is going on. So thinking about what's going on in your life, what can you leverage on to help you with this assignment or this test or this, general academic expectation, what might be holding you back a little bit, and how can you kind of balance and mitigate those to make sure you can get your task done. The next stage of the cycle is goals and planning. So this is, as it suggests, developing plans for your task. Something you really want to ask yourself is, what is a reasonable and achievable goal for this task? Something that I personally do a lot is like overshoot my goals and then I don't hit them and I feel really disappointed in myself. So something that I encourage my students to do and that I try to encourage myself to do is being reasonable and achievable in my goals. Rather than saying, I'm going to write 5 pages of my thesis by the end of tomorrow, which I have said to myself before, I'm working on saying like, let's write 300 words. And if I get more, amazing, awesome. But if I don't get more, then that's okay too. So thinking of something that is reasonable, achievable, that you will, that is also meaningful. So not just something like, I'm gonna write 1 word. Maybe that is meaningful to you. But for me, saying like, I'm gonna write 1 word this week would not feel like a meaningful goal. So something that is also meaningful to you. We're going to talk a bit about CAST goals as well, but I want to introduce them right now, which is called Concept, Action, Standard, Time. That's what CAST stands for. In the strategy library, it's also named task goals, so TASC, but they're the same thing. It's just the acronym slightly rearranged. What this means is that good goals should have a concept, meaning you understand, or that you're kind of setting a goal of what the concept is. So rather than the goal being study chapter 1, the goal should have a concept of, okay, what is in chapter 1? What exactly am I studying in chapter 1? Let's think about that. It should have an action, so a doing word. What are you going to do? Studying is kind of a doing word, but studying could mean a lot of different things. It could mean highlighting. It could mean reviewing. It could mean practice testing. It could mean peer collaboration. So thinking of a more specific action word rather than just studying. Standard is kind of the measurability of it. So how do you know that you actually achieved the goal? So if you say study chapter 1, how would someone know that they have studied chapter 1? Does it mean that they've gotten to the end of the chapter and they say, okay, I'm done? Or does it mean that they, when they say, okay, I studied chapter 1, does that mean that they fully understand everything? How do they know that they fully understand anything? And these are things that oftentimes we don't think about when we're setting goals, because we want to be able to know how do we know that we reached that goal? And then time. So picking a time, usually a 1 to 2 hour time block to complete that goal, to work on that goal, and to, ideally complete it. The next stage of SRL is task enactment, which I put as doing the thing. This is the thing that we think about the most when we're studying, is actually doing it. We often don't think about kind of the two parts before and the one part after and the part in the middle. We think usually about doing it. It's like, okay, I gotta open my textbook, let's just do it. In task enactment, it is important to review your CAST goal, so your good goal that you have set and working towards it. It's also really important to set yourself up in a space where you will work best. Some people work better in different environments. Some people, like myself, I need like a really quiet space to work without distractions. I have ADHD, so I get really distracted pretty easily. So if there are other things around me, like there's people talking, or there's like loud music playing, or there's like the sound of an espresso machine going, I'm gonna get distracted and not be able to focus. So I personally need like a really quiet, kind of low distraction space. Some people, on the other hand, may work better in the library where there's like lots of people around them, almost like body doubling them. They're also studying, they're also working. So some people may work really well in those environments. What's important is that you find an environment and a space that is conducive to your studying needs and your however you work best. So there's no right or wrong way or no right or wrong place to get your work done. There are definitely like suboptimal locations to be getting your work done. Like, the bus is probably not the best place to be writing a paper because it's kind of bumpy and hard to type. But find yourself a space that works for you, and whatever works for you that's what's important. And then also thinking about a 1 to 2 hour session. So we don't want to be sitting there for 6 to 8 hours cramming and cramming and cramming for a test. Our brains will get totally exhausted. Let yourself have little breaks. Maybe do a 2-hour study session and then take a bit of a walk outside or have some lunch, and then do some more studying. But make sure that you are purposefully putting in rest breaks, purposefully allowing time to like get up and move around, have some food, make sure you're drinking water and like making your brain work, because if you're not doing that, your brain's not going to work properly. And then finally, adaptation. So adaptation is the evaluation of your study session. That is kind of the reflective part that I think a lot of people, including myself, forget to do. So this is kind of a reflection of like, how did that study session go, or that paper writing session, or that test go? And how could that be adapted for a very similar one? So maybe how could that be adapted for your next midterm in the same subject? So that'd be kind of a small scale adaptation. Or how could this be adapted for like other disciplines or subjects or situations? So a larger scale adaptation. So for an example, let's say I wrote a test in biology, and I felt like it was going pretty well, but I ran out of time. I didn't get to finish my test. How could I adapt my kind of goals and planning and going over my material to be able to finish my test next time? And then a larger scale adaptation would be, how can I kind of take that learning experience of I didn't have enough time to finish my test to my next class or to the next paper that I'm writing. And then finally, metacognition, which I call the key to SRL. It is thinking about thinking. So there are multiple different types. So metacognition is kind of like an umbrella term, but there's metacognitive knowledge, metacognitive monitoring, and metacognitive control. So you may have heard of the word metacognition before, maybe you haven't. It comes from like meta, meaning like, meta is like a thing within a thing within a thing. So like it's like thinking about your thinking about your experience. Metacognitive knowledge is what learners know and believe about themselves, the tasks and strategies for completing the task. And metacognitive knowledge influences goals, it influences plans and strategies, and even motivational engagement. These definitions are all directly out of the strategy library, by the way, these metacognitive ones. So if you can't, if you're taking notes or anything and you wanting to know, again, it's all in the strategy library for you, so don't worry about that. Metacognitive monitoring refers to self-checking and through the process and existing knowledge in order to make evaluations about progress, performance, and kind of the set of standards that you've set for yourself. This sophisticated checking system is considered the hub of self-regulated learning. So monitoring your own experience and monitoring how you are learning throughout each stage of self-regulated learning is really, really foundational, which is why we often call it the key to SRL. And finally, metacognitive control refers to exercising your agency to adapt or change either the cognitive conditions that you're in, such as maybe your beliefs or knowledge about a subject, or the task conditions, such as the time allotted, or the resources available, or the space that you're in, or the thinking and engagement, like how you're engaging with the material, or your levels of mastery with the material, all that kind of stuff. Remember any study skill, center flexibility and kindness. So this is something that Hannah has put together. So this is a specific example of how to center diverse preferences through making a method flexible and remembering that kindness is key to yourself. So I think we have talked about this a lot, which is make sure that you are, giving yourself breaks, giving yourself rest. Don't overwork yourself, please, or you will get into burnout. This is collated from a fall 2024 keynote, which Hannah said, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Neurodiversity and disability are quite a vague spectrum, which I think they put at the bottom here. It's kind of it all comes and goes and ebbs and flows. And so tools should be equally flexible for work for a spectrum of people. A lot of typical learning strategy tools and approaches are kind of lack the required flexibility for neurodiverse brains. So here's an example with the Pomodoro technique and how it can be flexed. Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, and it's a way to structure study sessions. So 25 minutes of study, 5 minutes of break, times 4, and then a longer break. So one simple change that Hannah has worked with students on is to study for 15 minutes with a 10-minute break twice. So using, rather than doing the 20-minute and then, or 25-minute and then 5, do 50 and 10. So letting students kind of focus in a little bit harder, and then giving them a little bit of a bigger break. Kindness is super, super important in allowing yourself to adapt things, allowing yourself to adapt strategies and tools, and disability can come with a lot of self-judgment, self-criticism, and imposter syndrome. So let's not add to that when we're learning strategies. The aim of study skills is to provide accountability and to help folks finish tasks, help them organize, setting mini deadlines and check-in points. It is a plan that we try to achieve, but it is never perfect. I am sure all of you have been in a situation where you have a goal and you don't reach it, and that's okay. Getting out of your head might help, and getting it onto the page, it doesn't mean that the goal still can't be fluid. So allowing yourself kind of that flexibility to do what you need to modify things for your experience is really important. Something I have done, or I have recommended to a student that I was TAing, was there is a strategy called I think it's called the 5-minute plan or something along those lines. And the idea is basically you tell yourself, okay, I'm going to work for 5 minutes. And then you set a timer, go for 5 minutes, and the timer goes off. You decide, am I going to continue, yes or no? something that I have suggested to neurodiverse folks is setting that timer for a little bit longer. As people that are neurodivergent, we can take a little bit longer to focus in on the task, maybe spend a little bit more time being distracted before being fully focused in the task. And by the time we're kind of just getting focused in the task, the timer goes off, and that may interrupt kind of the flow that we're just starting to get into. So allowing yourself a little bit of leeway and adaptation of strategies is incredibly important when you're working with neurodivergent students, or if you are a neurodivergent student yourself. So speaking of strategies, let's take a tour of the strategy library. So let me just pause the recording here and I will get that up. Go. Okay, so once you get yourself in the strategy library, the link is in the slides as well. At the bottom of most of the slides, it says like credit to the strategy library. Click on that link. It's a hyperlink. It will get you in there. If you're not already in there, you can register for it there. And the strategy library is open to any student, staff, or faculty at UVic. So anyone can use it. You don't need to be part of the LAP. You don't need to be even a student anymore. As long as you're just a staff member and you have a NetLink ID and access to Brightspace, you can access it. So the strategy library has lots of different things, has a bit of an introduction to learning strategies, talks a bit about self-regulated learning. This is, as you scroll down here, you'll see lots about self-regulated learning. Here's kind of the cycle of self-regulated learning, which you can work through and work towards if that's something that you're interested in doing. What's important here is kind of finding the right strategy. So the Learning Strategy Library has some really cool resources, which is talks about kind of finding personalized strategies for you. So there are assessment tools that you can use in the strategy library. You will need to do a consent form, I believe, because the data that they collect goes into academic literature that they're working on. So there will be some sort of consent form, which is down here. You'll ask to participate in research. And you can click on that and it'll do the things for you. But if you're interested, it will produce these kind of interesting reports for you, talking about challenges that you may be having. Let's see. So there's kind of 6 different academic challenges that are gauged on these kind of like almost car dials. So talking about motivation, behavioral, cognitive, social and emotional, and metacognitive, and COVID distress. So, you know, the green means like you're probably doing pretty well, things are probably doing okay. The orange is like, just like kind of a stoplight. The orange is like warning, like, you know, this might be going into the red, but like keep an eye out on it. And red is like, okay, this is, you know, clearly a stressor or something that you're feeling challenged by right now academically. There's a bit of a debrief on that. And then there's also the studying an SRL report. So this specifically talks about importance, confidence, and practices. So so for example, I don't know if you guys can see this, it's a little bit small, but right here, the very first bar graph, it says task understanding. The importance bar, which is the blue one here, it's at the low level. So someone feels like task understanding is really not that important. Like, you know, as they answer the survey, their questions are indicating that they're not finding task understanding important. However, like very differently, they have their confidence at the highest possible level. So they're saying it's not very important, but I'm really confident in it. And then the last bar here, this orange one, says what's actually happening. And the practices are low. So the priority is low, the practice is pretty low, even though the confidence is high. So kind of seeing where these discrepancies are can help you learn a little bit more about yourself. There are so many different types of strategies within the strategy library. As you kind of go through this profile, you can look at the ones that are more important to you. So maybe motivation is something that you're struggling with, and there's tons of different strategies on that. So I invite you to all play around in the strategy library. There's I would say at least 50 different strategies in here. Some will work for you, some may not work for you, but one that we're going to focus on today is task or CAST goals. So this is within the setting goals and planning for learning section, but we are going to do a bit of an example on CAST goals. So let me bring that back up here. So now that we've talked a bit about goals and what they mean, I want everyone to think of an academic task that you need to complete in the next week. What is your goal? So think for, a few seconds, something that you may need to do, whether it's writing a paper, marking some papers, attending a class, anything like that. What's a goal that you need to have? So I'm going to have an example goal here that is study chapter 1 in my biology textbook. So think about study chapter 1 in my biology textbook. So what do we think of that goal? Do we think that study chapter 1 in my biology textbook is a good goal or maybe not as good of a goal? What are we thinking? I'm thinking that it is not a fantastic goal because it doesn't have a lot of these elements of CAST. Oh, I went backwards, not forwards. There we go.
Oh, someone says, as you noted earlier, it could be more specific.
It could be more specific. Yes, absolutely. So we're going to talk a bit about, let's rethink that goal a little bit. So let's go back to the goal, which is study chapter 1 in my biology textbook. So let's rethink, what is the concept that you need to know to complete this goal? So maybe chapter 1 in your biology textbook, what it really focuses on, one important element of it is the steps of mitosis, which is like a way that cells develop, if you're not sure what that is. So in chapter 1 of your textbook, this is what it covers. So you need to know the steps of mitosis. Okay, great. We have a concept. Okay, the action that you need to do. The action that we had in the original goal was just study. But we want to use kind of more active learning action words there. So maybe the thing that you need to do is identify each step of mitosis and explain what happens, the mechanisms and the physical changes during each step. So that is very different than just saying study it. So you need to be able to identify these. The next thing is the standard of completing this goal. How will you know that you've achieved it? Does anyone have any examples of how they would know that they have achieved the goal? It's like, okay, my goal is know the steps of mitosis and be able to explain what happened. How do you know that you have reached that goal? Maybe you can explain this step. Sorry, maybe if you can explain the steps to someone verbally. Yes, absolutely. That's a great method, kind of like a peer teaching method. That is absolutely an option. Another option is like self-testing. So maybe you make flashcards or a Quizlet, and if you can properly I write down all of the steps and what they do and get it all right, you've achieved your goal. And then finally, the time. So just saying study chapter 1 of my bio textbook doesn't identify the time. So what do you need to study it for? Do you have a midterm coming up? When do you want to start learning this material? So pick a time, ideally a day and a time where you're going to be doing it, so you can hold yourself accountable, sit down at your desk or wherever you are and say, okay, this is the thing that I'm going to do. This is what I need to know. Here's how I know I'm going to do it. And this is my focus time to do it. Let me get myself a little snack and some water and maybe like a fun little coffee and get my work done. So that's an example of how you can use these task or CAST goals. These goals are quite foundational to learning strategies. So as you go through learning strategies and explore the learning strategy library, using these goals as you are also practicing strategies is super foundational and important. So I really encourage everyone to kind of get familiar with these types of goals as you start exploring the library. So we have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to stop our recording here. Thank you so much to everyone who is watching the recording. Really appreciate you tuning in today. And for the people in person, I'm going to stop our recording and we can have a little bit of a question period. So let's stop that.